Welcome everyone to today's webinar hosted by JPAL Global's Jobs and Opportunity Initiative and Social Protection Initiative. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. We really appreciate it. Before we begin, just to note that the webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our webpage in the coming weeks. By participating in this session, you are consenting to being recorded. Next slide, please. What we'll cover today is a brief introduction to JPAL and then to the African Scholars Program. I'll then hand over to Stefano Carrier to introduce the Jobs and Opportunity Initiative and the Social Protection Initiative. We'll then go through some proposal application tips and have Natalie provide more detail on the upcoming funding window and next steps on how and when to apply. We'll end off with a Q&A session, but feel free to add any questions in the chat as we go through the presentation. Thank you. By way of introduction, so my name's Lauren. I'm a Senior Education and Training Associate at JPAL Africa. I sit in the Cape Town office. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Natalie Valent, who you'll hear from later, as well as other team members from JOI and SPI. Natalie is a Senior Policy Associate at JPAL Global. She sits in Cambridge at MIT. There she works on the labor market sector. And in her role, she manages the Jobs and Opportunity Initiative, writes policy publications, and promotes evidence-informed policymaking. We are especially pleased to have Stefano Carrier join us today. Stefano is the JOI co-chair and academic lead from the University of Warwick. Stefano is a professor of economics. He uses experimental and structural methods to investigate how to make labor markets work better for the poor. In his recent work, Stefano evaluates a number of interventions designed to help different populations search for employment and to understand the causes and the consequences of labor turnover. So as I said before, Stefano is the co-chair of the Jobs and Opportunity Initiative and co-chair of JPAL's labor market sector. Stefano has previously served on the review board of the Jobs and Opportunity, the Social Protection Initiative, and I think the Jobs and Opportunity Initiative as well. So thank you very much, Stefano, for being here. We really appreciate it. Next slide. Okay. Diving into who and what JPAL is, our mission is to reduce poverty by ensuring that policy is informed by scientific evidence. We do this through research, through policy outreach and training, as you can see on the screen. At our core is research. We focus on randomized evaluations specifically. We work with a network of researchers who are typically economists based at different universities around the world, who are united by the use of randomized evaluation as a strategy to measure the impact of social programs and policies. At JPAL, we work with academic experts from this network to synthesize lessons we are learning from the research and to share that information with stakeholders who can hopefully find it useful in their decision-making. So whether that be governments, NGOs, funders, or others. And then finally, we do capacity building to help partners who want to skill up in their ability to either use or generate this type of research. Next slide, please. At JPAL, we value global knowledge and local grounding. I won't spend too much time here, but to give you a snapshot of our work, our network of affiliates has more than 2,000 randomized evaluations in countries around the world on topics spanning agriculture, firms, education, labor, social protection, amongst others. And we really look at this vast body of research, try and find cross-cutting themes and pull out policy lessons to inform future programs and policies. If you are interested in learning more about randomized evaluations, we have some really interesting resources on our webpage, and later in the week, I'll share some resources with you as well, so you'll have that in your back pocket. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the African Scholars Program. On the African continent, local researchers often face significant challenges in accessing research funding, building connections with academic networks, and gaining exposure to randomized controlled trials and training opportunities. And so to address these barriers, the African Scholars Program was established to support African researchers and to build a strong pipeline of successful local researchers across the continent. Historically, only JPAL affiliates and invited researchers were eligible to apply for funding from JPAL initiatives. And so in an effort to diversify our research network and make it more locally grounded, we established this African Scholars Program. Next slide. Focusing on the JOI African Scholars Program, we provide researchers with an access to a range of funding opportunities. African scholars in our program are also eligible to apply for research funding through other initiatives that run their own African Scholars Program. In addition, we offer training and capacity building opportunities that include webinars, online courses, tailored training for African academics, and application support. Mentorship is a key component of our program. If you're a funded resident African scholar, you will receive mentorship from a researcher within JPAL's network. We also support African scholars in advancing their projects to the next level. So whether that may be through advice on scaling or dissemination strategies or other areas of need. Next slide. Okay, so JOI offers 3 different types of grants. Proposal development funding of up to $10,000, funding for pilot and monitoring systems of up to $75,000, and funding for full-scale randomized evaluations of up to $350,000. Just to note that other initiatives do have different caps under the different grant types. African scholars are eligible to apply for proposal development and pilot grants without prior RCT experience, and can apply for full RCTs once a JPAL-funded pilot has been successfully completed. So later on, we'll share some more information on the JOI SPI funding window, but you could also keep an eye out on our website and webpage for updates as well. Okay, that's all from me. I'll hand over now to Stefano, who'll go through the motivation and thematic focus areas of JOI and SPI. Thank you, Stefano.
All right, thank you so much. And it's great to see many people here. So nice to see everyone. So I'm just going to talk for maybe 5-10 minutes about the 2 initiatives that are behind this call. So the first one is the Jobs and Opportunity Initiative. That's the initiative that I co-lead with the Jin Kai at the University of Maryland. And it's kind of associated with the labor sector of JPAL. The other co-chair for that is Marianne Bertrand. Is also associated with the firm sector of JPAL. Hopefully I'm not confusing everybody with all this internal organization, but the other co-chair of the firm sector is Dave Atkin. But basically, this is an initiative that is designed to fund randomized evaluation of innovative strategies to improve the employment outcomes and the business outcomes of firms and workers in low and middle income countries. Our motivation is probably clear to many of you, but just to rehearse the key facts, we have a big problem of unemployment in the world. There are more than 200 people that are currently unemployed. We have an even bigger problem of youth unemployment. So youth unemployment rates tend to be 3 times as large as the unemployment rates of your average adult. A fact that typically gets forgotten in a discussion of youth unemployment is also that most young unemployed people actually live in either a low or a middle income country, whereas 90% of the research has happened on youth unemployment in rich countries. So there is a real mismatch between the amount of research and the size of the problem in terms of youth unemployment. And we also know that finding that job is not the answer to it's not the final answer to people's problems, because many of the jobs are poorly paid. They offer uncertain, unstable working conditions. They don't offer nice career prospects, and so on and so forth. So even those numbers that focus just on the employment margin tend to underestimate the scale of the labor market challenge that many countries in the low and middle income category tend to face. So faced with this big challenge, we want to find some solutions. And our focus in particular is on programs that try to look at unlocking either challenges related to the accumulation of skills or challenges related to the job seekers' ability to place those skills in labor markets, or finally, to the underlying problem of creating demand for those skills. So let me be a bit more precise. So we know there are many reasons that have been explored in a long literature in economics that skills tend to be underprovided by private markets. And one type of skill that we're particularly interested in this particular point of the journey of the Jobs and Opportunity Initiative is soft skills. That's one skill, dimensional skill that perhaps was a bit overlooked in the earlier literature that looked at more technical skills that like welding, coding, those kind of like very specific technical skills. But there is an increasing realization that there is a surrounding set of skills, sometimes called soft skills, that enable people to be productive. They're not necessarily related to knowing how to master a specific task, but they're related to all the complementary steps that you need to then become productive in a firm. So these are things that enable you to, for example, master the enthusiasm required to learn specific skills and then operate effectively in a work environment through effective communication, effective teamwork with your colleagues, and so on and so forth. So skill provision is a central theme. We're also interested in then matching people with certain skills to certain jobs, and ideally doing that, stimulating job demand. Next slide, please. The second initiative that is relevant today is the Social Protection Initiative. That's the co-chairs of that are Rima, Hannah, and Ben Olken, there on the slide. This is an initiative focused on funding RCTs of social protection programs in low and middle income countries. Now, just a couple of words on motivation. There has been an incredibly very exciting increase in the number of programs that are designed to combat poverty in low and middle income countries in the last few years. So many countries have started moving away from, I guess, a traditional model that was more focused on food subsidies or different forms of price controls towards programs that directly put money into poor people's pockets. And given that there is such a big increase in such programs, we want to understand how to optimally design these programs to lift people out of poverty. So we are particularly interested in programs that provide financial assistance to the poor, that think of insurance, because very often the problem is not just not having money, it's exposure to shocks. We're interested in programs that not only lift people one step up, but really break a poverty trap so that they initiate virtuous cycles where people invest some of the gains that they make from the first intervention and can increase their incomes more and more over time. And we're also interested to think about holistically of offering support to people along the life cycle. So starting from young age to adolescence to being a young adult and then an adult and finally pension and old age. Next slide. So the reason why we mentioned these two initiatives is because there are two separate funding windows that will open very soon. The first one is entirely managed by JOI in collaboration with IPA, but that's a JOI funding window that will focus on soft skills. When we say focus on soft skills, we mean that we want either project that have a main focus on soft skills or project that are focused on something else, but where soft skills is still a key component of the research design. So you don't need to have a project that is where soft skill is the first keyword that you would write when you summarize the topic of the project, but it does have to have a clear soft skill angle. Then there is a second funding window that's coordinated by both the Jobs Opportunity Initiative and the Social Protection Initiative. And that will be open to projects that have either a labor market or a social protection angle or a combination of those two. And now there are two slides that will discuss in depth what kind of projects would fit under either of these windows. So for the first window, the JOI, the Jobs Opportunity Initiative soft skill window, these are some of the research questions, for example, that we would love people to write proposals about. Number one is we'd like to understand a bit better what soft skills matter. We have a sense from several studies that soft skills can be very important. For example, there was a great evaluation a couple of years back by Namrata Kala and co-authors in India, showing that providing factory workers soft skills reduce turnover, or there are some great projects in Western Africa that provide certain type of soft skills to entrepreneurs, and they show that entrepreneurs thrive when they are given these soft skills. But our understanding of the type of soft skills that matter for specific people is still very patchy. So we would love, first of all, to have more research just documenting the impact of soft skills for different groups. What soft skills do we need to make progress on female employment, on youth employment, on entrepreneurship, and so on, for refugees, and so on and so forth. Secondly, we'd like to understand the interaction between soft skills and other programs. So it will be very often the case that you'll be thinking of these programs not in isolation, but as part of a broad package of things that the government is offering, for example, to tackle youth employment. So how to best combine programs that are doing other things, for example, providing technical skills with soft skills components is something that would be of particular interest to us, because we expect that lots of the applications will be of this type, applications where we will be mixing different interventions. And so that's a second area that you could focus on. A third area is that although soft skill may be important, they may not be enough. So perhaps if you teach me communication and teamwork, that's great. But if I'm still locked out of the labor market because I don't have the money to go out to the city and find a job where I can actually use those soft skills, the impact of that initial intervention will be diminished. And so thinking of how constraints interact, thinking of, okay, once I've given people soft skills, are there other complementary things that I need to offer them so that they can make the most of those soft skills? Those kind of questions will be of major interest to us. And finally, we'd love to see more research on scale. So the interventions I mentioned before, both the India program and the West Africa Togo program, these were both fairly small programs that can be delivered at high quality by a small NGO that is just training a limited number of people. If we find that there are benefits to boosting these kind of skills in a broader population, we'd also like to understand better whether there are challenges that emerge when you try to train people in soft skills at scale. So maybe things related to the quality of the trainers, or things related to unexpected negative effects that happen when everybody is trained in a given soft skill, and so on and so forth. So these would be questions that are of interest to us. Next slide, and then I guess I'm almost done. Moving on to the second window, this is the Joint Jobs Opportunity Initiative and Social Protection Initiative window. Now, this window is not linked to soft skills, so it has a broader approach, and basically we want to cover programs that either have a labor market component or a social protection component, or a combination of those two. We're particularly interested in programs that will tackle job creation challenges. We believe strongly that we can make a lot of progress by training people, by helping them search for work, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, the demand for workers among firms will become a hard constraint. And so programs that think also of the demand for labor, not just the supply of labor, will be of great interest to us and will be a good fit for this window. So, for example, programs that identify high potential businesses and support their growth. There is a lot of excitement now related to programs that try to connect businesses to new markets and thereby generate new demand for workers as businesses grow, firm management, and so on. So that's the first set of programs that would fit under this window. Then more traditional labor market programs like training and matching would definitely fit under this window. And finally, social protection programs, in particular programs that are either focused on poverty traps or focused on providing insurance. And finally, programs that think of a life cycle more broadly, those would be a good fit for this program. And I think that takes me to the end of my part. All right. So hopefully this was clear. Basically, we have two initiatives and two funding calls, and a lot of and we're very excited to receive proposals from people in this group on some of the things that I've just mentioned, or other things that you think could be related to the kind of projects, the kind of research we want to fund with these initiatives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stefano. That was super helpful. And it was very clear. Thank you. I'm gonna move on to the next section, which is about writing a strong proposal, and we'll give you some helpful resources to leverage as well if you're interested in putting through an application. Okay, so when we review proposals, we're looking for a number of things. The proposal must be based on a strong research idea. It must be clear that there's a pathway to an eventual RCT and an eventual full-scale RCT. The proposal must follow the application deadlines, and guidelines. The proposal should be written clearly, simply, and succinctly. It should avoid some common mistakes, and it should be well planned. We have developed some resources that provide details on what to include in a proposal. And they will be provided in these slides as well that I'll send through later in the week. Slide. What makes a strong research idea? First of all, that it's academically interesting. This means that it's making a contribution to the literature by addressing a gap in the existing body of knowledge on the topic you're working on. Secondly, JPAL prioritizes research that is policy relevant. So ultimately, we want to fund research that has real world implications and speaks to challenges facing governments trying to advance development in their country. Thirdly, it must fall within the JOI research agenda or the SPI research agenda, which we discussed earlier. And it's important to demonstrate in your proposal that you understand the current state of knowledge in the area you want to study. Finally, it needs to be an idea that's RCT-able. And when we say RCT-able, what we mean is that there's a cause and effect question where an intervention is being implemented and can be allocated to recipients in a randomized design. The impact of the program can then be measured by comparing the outcomes in the treatment and control groups. Next slide. So what does a clear pathway to randomized evaluation look like? So we need to see that at least in the proposal, there needs to include a program that's either already being implemented or that will potentially be implemented in the future. In other words, so there needs to be an intervention or planned intervention described as part of the proposal. For example, something like a program to train unemployed youth on how to write effective resumes, or a program to provide transport subsidies to help job seekers search for employment. In addition, it must be clear how the program can be randomized, so that a randomly selected group receives the program while another group that's randomly selected does not. For pilot, there needs to be an indication of commitment from an implementing partner that and there needs to also be a clear explanation of how the pilot will lead to and inform a larger randomized evaluation down the line. Okay, so to help with your proposal writing and budgeting, we've created a few resources to support in putting together your application. This includes how to write a competitive grant proposal guide, and I think a video to go along with that, and another guide on budgeting for RCTs. We also have other materials available on our webpage, so I encourage you to explore those if you're interested. And like I said, I'll share some with you later in the week. Additionally, you can sign up for the African Scholars Registry to receive ongoing updates on new opportunities and resources as they become available. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Natalie to do the next section.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Lauren. Thank you. Yeah, so to conclude our presentation, I think I'm going to go over some more logistical information about the upcoming call for funding. So to give sort of a high-level overview of the timeline for our next call, the application will open in early February, so that's coming up very quickly. And applications will be collected on a grant management system that we call WiseHive, and you'll submit the application there. I won't go into details now about that, but there will be more information about the platform and how to use it and a guide for applicants on our website when the RFP launches. So please look out for that. And there will be a help desk as well, should you run into any technical issues. There will also be application templates that lets you preview all of the application questions before submitting. So you should have access to every single question as you are preparing your materials. Then sort of our application cycle has a couple of more stages. So you will first submit something we call a letter of interest, and those are due in early March. Then if you are invited to the next stage, after we determine eligibility and other criteria, you will submit a full proposal, which will be due in early to mid-April. From there, our team and our academic leads reviews all of the proposals, and decisions will be released sometime in June 2025. And then on eligibility for our African Scholar Program in particular, so for this funding call, resident African scholars are eligible to apply. And so what does that mean? That means that it is a scholar who has completed a PhD in economics or a related field, and who is based at an academic institution in sub-Saharan Africa. So those that are based at academic institutions in other geographies are ineligible to apply for this funding round. And I think a note about this is that only one person on the research team, the primary PI, should need to fill this definition. So if there's other members of your team or people that you're working with closely, they certainly don't need to meet this criteria, but at least one person does. Next slide, please. Great. So now I'm just going to give a little bit more information about each of the different grants that resident African scholars can apply to under this JOI and SPI funding round. So the first is something called a Travel and Proposal Development Grant, which Lauren previewed earlier in the presentation. So this is a grant that is somewhat smaller, and it's exploratory, for example, to hold meetings with partners if you're needing to travel to another location for those meetings, or as the name suggests, develop a proposal for a proposal idea or concept for a future pilot or RCT. And you can submit for up to $10,000 US for these proposals. These applications are fairly straightforward, but as I previewed on the last slide, we still require a letter of interest submission and a full proposal submission. And that includes sort of a concise statement of topic, any proposed partners, if that's applicable, a discussion of the project's connection to JOI and SPI's key themes, as Stefano discussed earlier. We require a budget, so sort of detailing each different component of what you will be doing with that money, and some basic information about everyone on the research team. And on the screen, you'll see bullets 2 and 3. These also apply to pilot proposals, but I'll just go over them now. So for all of our scholars who apply and submit their letter of interest or LOI, we will hold pre-proposal calls to help you prepare for the full submission that is due in mid-April. So what does this look like? We, as the JPAL team, would review your submission and then host a one-on-one call with you ahead of the application deadline to provide feedback, application tips, and answer any questions you might have about the process. This is for both travel grants and pilots, as I mentioned earlier. If your project, either a travel grant or pilot, is successful and you are awarded funding, each funded team will be paired with a mentor from the JPAL network to help you throughout the course of your project. And then full guidelines and more information about all of what I just previewed, as well as anything else about JOI and SPI will be available on our website in early February. Next slide. Thank you. And to conclude, the other grant that is available is a pilot grant for up to $75,000 US. And these proposals are a little bit meatier than a travel grant. And what you would typically be doing is, maybe you're not ready for a full RCT, but you're wanting to explore if a concept works, and how to sort of evaluate that and work out all the kinks. So that is what a pilot could be used for. And in this application, we are looking for applicants to submit a problem statement and proposal narrative. It would need to include information on how this is contributing to the literature, the policy relevance, a description of the intervention and how you plan to randomize, any analysis approach, and other information. And I think critical to this pilot application is that you must demonstrate a viable pathway to an RCT. Similar to the travel grant, you must submit a budget and budget narrative, any letters of support from your implementing partners, as well as basic information about the research team. And as I mentioned earlier, you'll also be able to have pre-proposal calls with the team, and you'll be assigned a mentor if you are funded. So I think that's everything from my side and what we'll present here today. We will put these emails in the chat, but if you have any questions after the webinar is over, or we don't get a chance to ask them in the Q&A that's coming up, you can send us an email. It's just joy@nsp@povertyactionlab.org, and we can help sort out any issues or questions you might have then.